and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
A very good morning to you. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. To begin the news, here's a look at the lead stories. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the opposition leader met on Monday. The pilot who crash-landed a plane with passengers on their way to the Ogle Airport has been suspended. And in regional news, the governing Barbados Labour Party is promising to give workers the legal power to pick a trade union of their choice. And for the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, which results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon and leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Aubrey Norton, met on Monday. Mr. Norton could not be reached for comment and Mr. Harmon declined to speak about the meeting. Sources close to the talks say that the two politicians had a good meeting and the situation remains the same. The PNCR's Central Executive Committee has decided that Mr. Norton should enter the National Assembly and become opposition leader. Other party sources say that the matter can possibly be taken to the National Assembly, where the main opposition parliamentarians will be required to vote on whether they will like Mr. Harmon to be removed from the post as opposition leader. The Roraima Airways pilot of the Britain-Norman Trilander that he landed in a swampy area near the Hagsbosch landfill site last year has been suspended, officials said on Monday. This decision was made public by the Director General of the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority, GCAA, retired Lieutenant Colonel Egbert Field.
Some penalties were applied to the operator and to the pilot involved. And those penalties have been activated and the pilot is now undergoing or in suspension for that accident for a particular period.
That aircraft had been under the command of Captain Larry Barclay when it made an emergency landing on August 14, 2021. The plane, whose registration marking is 8RGRE, had been returning from Imbimadai. Aviation Minister Juan Edgell gave one of the reasons for the crash landing of the plane as it had been heading to the Eugene F. Correa Ogle International Airport.
I've received preliminary reports from all. Final reports are awaiting. For example, parts have been sent overseas for testing and for opinions from the manufacturers. For example, while we know the Higgs-Bosch accident there would have resulted as a result of fuel starvation, you don't guess your way east.
Aviation Minister Juan Edgell. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says that approval has been given to use Pfizer as a booster vaccine for those persons who have received Sputnik. He says there are very limited supplies of Johnson & Johnson vaccines, and 25,000 Johnson & Johnson doses are expected this week. The health minister says that a decision has been taken to use Pfizer as a booster.
When the committee that oversees these things within the ministry would have done that scientific evaluation, they felt that Pfizer can also be offered, and therefore we have adjusted the schedule to allow our staff to be able to give that Pfizer dose as a booster dose. So right now, if someone is desirous of having a booster and that site does not have the J&J vaccine, then they would be able to offer to the person a Pfizer vaccine. Before, they weren't able to do that because of our instructions.
The health minister says persons who have taken one dose of Johnson & Johnson must now take a second dose as a booster.
For some persons who took this single dose J&J, the advice now is for them to come back after 2 months, because in most of the medical literature right now, J&J is not considered to be only a single dose vaccine, but a requirement now after 2 months for you to get a second dose. And therefore persons who took one dose and now past the 2 months period should come back and get a second dose. So we want people to understand that.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony. Meanwhile, latest official statistics show that 438 new cases have been recorded within the past 24 hours. Of the 107 persons in hospital, 8 are receiving intensive care. The Ministry of Health also says that 6,006 persons have now been ordered to isolate themselves at home to avoid spreading the disease. The Private Sector Commission, PSC, is partnering with the Government of Guyana to carry out a massive cleanup exercise of the city of Georgetown. The umbrella business organization says the cleanup will be done this Friday and Saturday. According to the PSC, the exercise is being done in collaboration with the joint services, the Ministry of Public Works, the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority, and the Solid Waste Management Unit. The exercise will include the desealing of main canals and clearing of garbage in several areas, including West Front Road, Cemetery Road, Sheriff, Hadfield, Durban, Saffron, Church, and Sussex Streets. The PSC says several businesses have already donated items towards the cleanup exercise and encourages others to support the initiative. Chairman of the PSC, Mr. Paul Chung, said the Commission recognizes the importance of public-private partnership and is pleased to support the cleanup exercise so that Guyanese and tourists alike can transact their business in a cleaner and more comfortable environment. The PSC's support of the cleanup exercise is in direct response to a request from President Irfan Ali for the private sector to lend its support in making this exercise a success. A policewoman was yesterday killed in a vehicular accident at the Le Penitence public road in the vicinity of the Le Penitence Market. Dead is 57-year-old Dawn Booker, who was a special corporal and was attached to the Small Business Bureau. Ms. Booker resided at Perseverance Maikoni, East Coast Demerara. Police released video footage showing the woman riding on Saffron Street when she was struck by a lorry. A breathalyzer test conducted on the driver shows that he was not under the influence of alcohol. The lorry owner and the driver are both from number 47 Village, Quarantine, Barbados. Police say that video footage shows that as Booker and another cyclist were passing each other in opposite directions, she swerved and lost control of the pedal cycle. She reportedly fell on the eastern edge of the road where she came into contact with the left rear wheel of the motor lorry. She suffered injuries to her head and other areas. And now in regional news. The governing Barbados Labour Party, BLP, is promising to enact legislation to guarantee workers' right to join a union of their choice. This announcement was made on the campaign trail for the January 19th general election. We have details from Barbados Today.
BLP candidate for St. George North, Tony Moore, at Sunday's mega manifesto meeting. She made it clear that the BLP is committed to improving the plight of the working class people, and it will roll out a slew of policies in their interests.
In 2022, as I stand here before you on January the 9th, the trade unions still don't have formalized trade union processes, so that when a union wants to get involved to represent working class people, there's no clear automatic way of determining how that recognition is going to go. Rights matter. And in this Barbados Labour Party, the Barbados Workers Union is proud that in a matter of months, we would finally be rolling out a trade union recognition bill. A bill that will bring security to workers who want to join a trade union and for whom at this time, joining that trade union could be iffy sometimes, because that's the very time you lose your job, when people see that you're trying to have representation.
BLP candidate for Barbados's upcoming general election, Tony Moore, ending that report from Barbados Today. Trinidad and Tobago's supermarkets say they are not increasing prices unfairly. That twin island nation, as well as countries in the Caribbean and elsewhere, have seen a steep increase in the prices of food, construction materials, agricultural inputs, and other imports. More in this report from TTT News Online.
There is no price gouging among members of the Supermarket Association in Trinidad and Tobago. This, according to President of that organization, Rajiv Dipti. Mr. Dipti noted that the majority of his members try to maintain lower costs for many goods on the shelves, but they are challenged by continued increases of basic food items on the international market. He explained that the increases are not native to this country.
Where the core food basket of goods is concerned, we always have concerns on cooking oil, flour, sugar, and it's something that continues to move. It's still benefiting from the reduction of 12.5%. Very importantly, that is removed from in the final equation of your bill at the register. And that is something, when we talk about the core food basket and we talk about those things, we try to keep with care on the shelves those goods that are considered very basic for the vulnerable consumer, because those that class of customer, that level of person that's coming into the store, you really want to ensure that they are able to buy goods for their families, because it's not just food stuff that's going up, Natalie. Of course, it's pharmaceuticals, it's everything right now due to the inflationary pressures being experienced by the pandemic.
Mr. Dipti noted that import substitution is needed to help reduce food prices. He emphasized that encouraging an enabling environment and preventing predial larceny and other crimes is a major factor. Mr. Dipti said that members of his association have expressed interest in branching out into agriculture.
We're willing to get into agriculture and getting to agro-processing and getting into farming. There are a lot of opportunities. However, it takes work not just from the agricultural side, but also work with the consumer, because as I suggested earlier, their tastes and preferences determine what ultimately comes out onto the market.
That report from TTT News Online. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown says his country will be borrowing to help stimulate economic growth. Mr. Brown, who is also Finance Minister, is forecasting an 8% economic growth this year. Antigua and Barbuda's economy has been battered for almost 2 years, ever since the coronavirus prevented tourists from visiting the twin island nation. More from ABS Radio.
Prime Minister Gaston Brown, who's also Finance Minister, says he anticipates the economy will grow by at least 8% this year. 2022 budget will be geared at stimulating the economy, even if there's a fiscal deficit.
I believe we'll be presenting another $1 billion budget, possibly running a deficit again. And it's important that we do so in order to stimulate the country's economy. We may have to increase our borrowings as well.
Last year's budget was $1.4 billion. The Prime Minister says with more stability amid the ongoing pandemic, the government can use more resources to grow the economy.
Now is the time for us to borrow to stimulate the country's economy. If we had done so, let's say, 21 months ago, it would have been a wasted effort. So it's also about the timing of the spending that will determine whether or not you are effective or successful in stimulating the economy.
Jessica Russell, ABS News.
Antigua and Barbuda's economy grew by 4% last year. However, the government had struggled several times to pay salaries and pensions. And now for the international news, here's the latest coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. The president of Kazakhstan says a Russian-led military force which helped to quell nationwide unrest will begin leaving on Thursday. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev told Parliament that the withdrawal will be completed within 10 days. Our correspondent Steve Rosenberg reports from Almaty. I'm sorry, we don't seem to have that report just at the moment. The United Nations has warned that a humanitarian disaster is unfolding in Afghanistan, with more than half of the population struggling to find enough to eat. Foreign aid, which funded 3/4 of Afghanistan's public services, has mostly dried up since the militant group's takeover in August. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said Afghanistan needed $5 billion in aid to avoid the country's collapse.
The conflict between the Taliban and the previous government is over, and that has opened up some space of security, which I think we need to take advantage of. But to do that, we need those resources that are part of this appeal. The key here is to stabilize the situation inside Afghanistan, including that of displaced people who are displaced inside their country.
North Korea has fired a suspected ballistic missile into the sea less than a week after testing what it said was a hypersonic weapon. The latest launch has been criticised by South Korea and the Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, who described it as extremely regrettable. From Tokyo, here's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes.
North Korea's missile test serves several functions. One could be to divert public attention from an increasingly severe economic situation in the country brought on by the COVID pandemic. Another could be to get the attention of the Biden administration, which has shown little interest in resuming negotiations with Pyongyang after the failed summit between former President Trump and Kim Jong-un in 2019. There is a third reason. North and South Korea are engaged in what observers say is an increasingly intense arms race. Both sides are working to perfect smaller and more deadly missile systems with which they can threaten each other's leaderships.
The Indian capital, Delhi, has ordered staff at all private offices to work from home as it steps up efforts to slow the spread of the Omicron coronavirus variant. There are exceptions for essential services such as pharmacies and telecoms. Delhi's Chief Minister, Arvind Kejriwal, is also offering online live yoga classes to people isolating, saying it will help boost immunity. BBC News. The man accused of setting fire to South Africa's parliament earlier this month is facing an additional charge of terrorism after being accused of detonating an explosive device. Zandile Mafe has already been charged with arson, theft, housebreaking and possession of explosives. The Australian government says it still hasn't decided whether or not to deport the tennis star Novak Djokovic. After a court ruled on Monday that the Serbian player was allowed to stay in Australia, officials immediately said they were considering sending him home anyway. The Immigration Minister, Alex Hawke, was said to be thoroughly considering the matter. Meanwhile, Djokovic has continued to practice for the Australian Open, which begins next week. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing fresh questions about why as many as 100 people were invited to drinks in the garden of his residence during the first strict lockdown in May 2020. An invitation from his principal private secretary urged people to bring their own drinks and enjoy the lovely weather. About 30 people are said to have attended. An inquiry is taking place, and British police say they're in contact with the senior civil servant conducting it, Sue Gray. A junior health minister, Edward Arger, told the BBC if restrictions had been broken, he would expect disciplinary action.
Everyone wants to know. I want to know exactly what happened, what did or didn't happen, and I look forward to Ms Gray making those findings public as swiftly as possible. But I don't want to speculate on what she might or might not say. I think it is important to give her the space to do her job, which I know she will do without fear or favour.
A rat bred in Tanzania, which helped locate more than 100 landmines in Cambodia, has died. The Belgian charity that donated and trained Magawa, as the rodent was known, said it died at the weekend at the age of 8. And that's the latest BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
To end the news, here's a look at the leads once again. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the opposition leader met on Monday. The pilot who crash-landed a plane with passengers on their way to the Ogle Airport has been suspended. And in regional news, the governing Barbados Labour Party is promising to give workers the legal power to pick a trade union of their choice. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.